Influence, the global podcast that shines a spotlight on the influencer marketing industry.
Welcome to Influence, the global podcast that shines a spotlight on the influencer marketing industry. I'm Gordon Glenister, and over the next few episodes, I'll be speaking in depth with some of the industry's leading brands, platforms, and influencers themselves, starting today with Tom Orgenthaler. So Tom is one of the top 50 practitioners in the industry and consults with companies like HP, Time, and Adobe. He's also the founder of the Influencer Marketer, which is a premier resource for corporate marketers, agencies, and business owners to know a little bit more about how to use influencer marketing as a strategy that drives awareness and demand gen. You can learn about this by searching online for theinfluencermarketer.com. So I started, first of all, by asking Tom a little bit about his background.
I've been in the business for over 10 years, and I started when I was at HP. I was a PR manager when I was there, and I was handling consumer laptops product for them on a worldwide level. So there wasn't an announcement that went out about a consumer laptop that I didn't have my, fingerprints on to one degree or another. And while I was there, something happened with the economy. You'll probably remember this, like 2008, 9, around there, where, the whole crisis came into play and banks were failing.
Oh
and,
my God, yeah, absolutely.
All that kind of crap, and it was really pretty scary. But from the point of view of where I sat within the organization, it presented some new difficulties, and the difficulties included the fact that a lot of the journalists were losing jobs because the magazines they were employed with were going under. So one of two things happened: either the magazine folded, or the magazine went into an quote-unquote online format, which in those days, 2008, 9, was sort of like, you're not really that real anymore,
Yeah,
you're not a real publication. So that's when I started getting involved with influencers, because I needed to figure out a way to get the word out about my products, because there weren't as many publications anymore. They were gone. A lot of the journalists that I worked with had jumped ship, and I don't know, they went to other jobs or something, different careers. So I had to figure out a way around that, and the way around that was, at the time, bloggers. And then from there, I left HP in 2009, and I joined a small consultancy that specialized in influencers. And from there, I got involved in B2b Influencer Marketing, which is where I've pretty much been focused ever since. It's a niche within a niche, and it has a high barrier for entry, so it's harder to get into it, and it's harder to become an expert in it unless you've done it. So it's not just a matter of getting some Instagram influencers to promote your stuff, right? I mean, it's a lot harder to find the influencers, vet them, assess them, recruit them, and all those good things. So and then I in 2016 I jumped ship from there, and I've been out on my own since. So I'm a consultant, contractor, and work mainly with B2Bs and agencies, how to work with B2Bs.
Yeah. So what have you, with that sort of level of experience, what do you think, what are you noticing are some of the key trends facing influencer marketing now?
One of the trends, unlike what media will tell you out there, I do not see an end to influencer marketing anytime soon. I believe that it's still very nascent, and we have yet to see its full potential, because the tools are getting better out there, the measurement's getting better, the tracking's getting better. We can figure out where visitors are going much better than we ever could even 5 years ago, for God's sake. So all the measurement is going to get better. The platforms themselves, well, let's put it this way. So from the marketer's point of view, the measurement's going to get better, and the accountability is going to get better. The ROI is going to get better, because all those tools and everything are improving on a daily basis, pretty much. From an influencer standpoint, things are changing too. The platforms are starting to get wise to a lot of the tricks. They're taking note of all the complaints I'm talking about fake followers, fake engagement, comment pods, all these kinds of tricks and things to sort of boost your engagement or make you look more popular than you really are. And now that they're, Instagram is hiding likes. Twitter did that years ago. Do you remember? Twitter stopped showing how many shares you were getting, all these little, share buttons a long time ago. So they stopped that, and it didn't kill the platform. So Instagram's doing that. So I think that there's going to be greater accountability in 2020 from influencers than ever before. Also, with Facebook instituting its own, what do you want to call it, access platform to influencers that operate there and on Instagram, I think you're going to see a lot of the platforms that are third-party platforms out there that are, thinly funded collapse, which I think is a good thing, because I think that, quality over quantity is always preferable anyway. I'd rather 200 really good tools and platforms out there to use as opposed to 750 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. Let's equate it to something. Let's equate it to the PR industry, okay? That's a well-established industry. It's been around for, 100 years, right? Been around a long time. So to this day, corporations, brands still need the help of PR agencies and consultants.
Yeah.
They still do, right?
They do. Yeah.
And that's a well-established industry. So when we're talking about something as nascent as influencer marketing, right, which is in many ways a little bit more complex than PR, because you're actually doing marketing here. We're not just talking about, interacting with the media, mainstream media, or even online media. We're talking about, operating with individuals instead of, media companies. There's a long way to go. So I think the need for agencies and consultants is going to stick around for forever. I don't see it going away.
I think they're also in a better position to be able to support metrics and measurement and really advise people on what tools that they can best use, because there's so much out there, isn't there?
There is, and it's hard to tell what tools to use at times, right? I mean,
sure.
it's so many. And I think, as others have noted out there, there's such an influx of data now that it's difficult to parse, well, what data should I even be looking at? What data is important to me in my program? And, I think an agency or a consultant can really be a big help in terms of parsing through all of that and focusing on what matters as opposed to what doesn't matter. Yeah. And brands need a lot of help with that. A lot of brands are thinly stretched. A lot of them don't have big headcounts in these departments like social media and, influencer marketing and, even PR. PR teams tend to be very thin in some of these companies. So the need for an agency or consultancy is still very strong.
I think though some of the very bigger companies, they are creating influencer marketing roles, aren't they? Specifically, we're starting to see that a little bit. And when you get brands like sort of Estee Lauder saying they're going to spend 75% of their advertising revenue, advertising budget rather, in influencer marketing, that's a big statement. And
yeah,
those
it's
are
a huge statement,
isn't it? Which is good for all of us, quite frankly, because I think we can all ride off the back of that and say, look, this is a big brand making that sort of noise, then shouldn't you be considering it? There are recruitment specialists in this country that work in the influencer space, and they're starting to see more very dedicated and specific roles crop up in-house. So I thought that was quite an interesting development.
It is, and I'm encouraged by it. I think that, and that's true of consumer companies as well as B2B companies. They need to have some people on staff who understand this stuff and can manage an agency. Because once you say, I do not agree with the model where you just outsource everything to an agency, because then there's no knowledge capital residing within your organization itself.
Yes.
And that's not good. There has to be some knowledge capital residing within your organization so that everything can be managed as well as it can be. Now, agencies and consultants, like me, are really extensions of that. and we can bring in some outside perspective, which is very helpful, I think, because inside of a brand, I've operated inside of some big brands before, and they tend to get very insular. They get very insular in their thinking, and they're only caring about what the other silos think rather than, well, what does the customer think? What are the needs of our constituency out there?
I mean, what about content as well? Before long, Facebook is almost going to be an entire video platform. Do you see more and more brands using IG stories and video more widespread?
Oh, yeah. And I think it's natural. It makes a lot of sense. Video is a terrific way to sort of bridge that gap between you, if you're an influencer or even a brand, and the customer. I think you can put a human face on something that the written word isn't able to do quite as well. So that's not to say that long form content in the form of written blog posts and articles and stuff is going to go away anytime soon. I don't think it is. I think that it will just be sort of melded with video better going forward. Also, as tools get implemented where video can be analyzed for keywords and such, I think that will be a big help too, and that will boost the use of video even further. But another platform we're seeing too is the podcast audio.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Podcasts. I remember podcasts were the rage, like back in 2007, 6, 7, 8. Then they tapered off. Everybody started talking about video or whatever. And then they've reemerged in the last few years because it's a portable. It's a really nicely portable format. And I think that people can download it when they're running, walking, driving, whatever, and just listen. Yeah. I mean, it's really a terrific thing. So I think you're going to see podcasts continue to grow as well.
What are the sorts of tips and advice you would give to brands that are not sure about this sector? And actually, I know a very well-known champagne brand that is very reluctant to invest in this sector when they should absolutely be all over it. But they've been somewhat deterred by media, social media, bad publicity. And I almost want to change their opinion. But what's sort of some of the tips that you would be suggesting to people not sure?
First, you got to look at your brand itself, and you got to determine, well, what are we doing right as a brand, and what are we doing wrong as a brand, or not as well as a brand in terms of marketing. So step back and look at it from a higher level point of view, and say, well, how can we better reach our constituency out there? How can we better interact with our ideal customers? We can continue, every brand, whether it's a champagne brand or whatever. I mean, my father used to be in the liquor business, so I'm very familiar with a lot of those brands and how they operate. They advertise a lot, right? There's a lot of advertising, whether it's print advertising, it's TV advertising or whatever it is, online advertising even. That's all great, and it can convey a certain feeling about the brand. But what's to separate your product from another product, right? And we all know that in the liquor industry, for instance, the competition is tremendous. So, when my father was in the business, I think there were probably like 10 different brands of vodka. I mean, today there's probably several hundred.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh,
so,
it's ridiculous.
So how do you? Yeah. So the question then becomes, well, how do you distinguish your brand and your product from the competition? Well, one of the best ways to do that is through people. And that's what influencer marketing is. It's really just systematized word of mouth marketing. So I would do a few different things probably. If I was the champagne brand, I would look to set up a test campaign with some influencers that I identify, whether it's with the help of an agency or consultant or something, that's fine. Start small. You don't have to go big. There's all these media stories about, consumer brands like L'Oreal and, using 20,000 influencers. Okay, well, they worked their way up to that. They didn't start with 20,000 influencers, right? Yeah. They probably started with a dozen. So start small. Start with a dozen, right? Work out a program that you think, or a campaign that you think would help reach your target market. Is that target market in the United States, or is it in France? Is it in Germany? Where is it? Is it in Japan? Figure that out. and then work with influencers who reach those people. The biggest thing to make sure of, though, is that the influencers are congruent with your product and your brand. So if you're a health brand, for instance, I remember I worked with a health supplement company. It was a digestive aid. And they had contracted an agency to help them recruit some Facebook influencers and YouTube influencers to help market their product. And what the agency did was they just looked for health influencers and then put together a quick list and said, here are these people. Well, the company spent $50,000 on this program and got zero out of it. And when they asked me to take a look at it, it was immediately apparent that the influencers they had chosen were not congruent. Just because somebody talks about health doesn't mean that they're really, they're going to be listened to about digestive health, for instance,
indeed.
right?
Yeah.
For instance, what if they're talking about cardiac problems mostly? Maybe if their issue is cardiac, or maybe their issue is eczema, or their issue is, there's all these different health issues, right, that a lot of people niche down in, and they talk about, these influencers talk about, because it directly impacts their life. So to me, you'd want to find influencers that are directly related to the digestive health segment of the health sector. So that's what you'd want to do. You'd want to find influencers that are totally congruent and relevant, right? And that, that way you can really build a campaign that's going to resonate with your target market. So that's what I would do. I'd start small, research, hire a consultant or an agency to help you parse through it all. Don't listen to the bad press. Bad press sells, right? Every morning on our local news, there's, probably some story about the local apartment fire or shooting that happened the night before. Well, do I, if I listened to all that, I wouldn't leave the house, right?
Indeed, yeah.
So turn it off, and, there's great benefits to leaving the house.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you what also fascinates me is how influencer marketing is a great tool for disruptors and new startup businesses that don't necessarily have huge budgets. I mean, I'm thinking of restaurants and bars in as typical, where actually even by just gifting influencers meals or hotel nights or something or whatever it might well be is a great way to start sometimes, and then you can build a bigger campaign on the back of it. But in fact, I was speaking to somebody recently who's launched a vegan restaurant in London, and he used, I think it was about 6 or 7 influencers, and in terms of his return on investment, it's been phenomenal. In fact, 2 or 3 of them have each provided something like around 20-30 bookings through their friends and through their own audience. So that's what I think is interesting, isn't it? Where sometimes other advertising media, you're going to have to spend a lot more money to get not a lot back.
Exactly. So television advertising is very expensive. Print advertising is very expensive, and you usually have to go through these intermediaries sometimes to be able to even do it. So you're paying a fee to them on top of whatever the cost is to advertise in that media outlet. Now with the influencers, you're going direct to essentially you're going direct to your audience just through them. Yeah. And the wonderful thing is that a startup company like that, like you told me there, the little vegan restaurant, that's an entrepreneur. So an entrepreneur can pull the trigger pretty quickly. They can assess, evaluate, and then pull the trigger. That's where they have a real advantage. They're very nimble, right? And they can just start, boom, they can just start working with a new marketing, a marketing dynamic like influencers right away, where a bigger brand has to go through an assessment, right? Because there's more players involved, right? It's not just like one person says, hey, we're going to go do this with these guys now. Let's do that. There's a whole process they have to go through, right? Yeah. There's the vetting process, the onboarding process. I mean, there's, POs have to be cut, SOWs have to be submitted, right? So, I mean, it's a lot more.
They can't turn the ship around so quickly, can they? So in a way, they can't, that's the other thing. They can't react as quickly to an opportunity that may exist where there's quite a lot of a big news story about something very specific, and an influencer campaign can kick in very, very quickly. And also, if you think about it, photo shoots, how quickly is it to get stories together versus, hiring a studio, taking a film crew, which is what, big advertising campaigns have to consider. We've got our iPhones, and these are such great vehicles for influencers to be able to adapt super quick.
Exactly. So your restaurant example there, would you rather see some slick commercial about the restaurant, or that's obviously professionally shot or everything else, or would you rather hear from somebody like you who goes in and maybe does a really quick video with their iPhone and posts it to their blog or their YouTube channel or their Instagram, make it an Instagram story? It's like, hey man, that restaurant's just across town. Yeah. I can go check that out too. I think I will. That looks really good, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just, you've got this emotional connection because it's another person saying, wow, the food, the veggie burger here was terrific, right? I mean, it was like eating meat, I mean, it was wonderful. They make it on site. They have their own recipe. Hey, that sounds good. I think I'll go check that out, right? Yeah. Instead of a slick ad that's produced by some advertising firm, which they can be very effective too, don't get me wrong. But it's a lot simpler and much more direct going through the influencer.
Actually, you made a really good point, because there has been a bit of a kickback in the UK. I don't know if it's the same in the States, where overly photo affected imagery has seen as being somewhat inauthentic, and I think consumers want that reality shot. Want that genuine. They want to engage with somebody, and they want to know that it's not the oh so perfect picture, that just doesn't look real. And they can. I think people are getting wise to it now, actually, aren't they? Metrics, I'm interested to hear about from you. What do you think is the best ways to measure the effectiveness of influencer marketing campaigns?
It all depends on your goal. So if the goal is if you're a new brand and nobody knows about you, well, then you're going to need to build awareness about your brand. So you're going to want to use metrics that reflect that. If you're going to parse a little further and build brand consideration over other brands, well, now you're going to have to use a little different set of metrics. And then if you're going to measure leads, if you're going to try to get leads and then hopefully sales, well, you're going to use even different metrics from that. So the metrics get lumped into sort of one bucket when really they should be parsed out and looked at depending upon what your objective is, right? So, and here's something else, Gordon. I don't care what anybody says. Every single brand out there, every single one, whether you're a startup or you're a Fortune 100 brand or whatever, you always have to be building awareness. It never stops. Building awareness is not, hey, we're going to build we're going to build awareness for one campaign, and then we're going to go do brand consideration, and then we're going to do leads. You could do it that way, but all of your campaigns are actually going to be building your brand or building awareness around your brand. So keep that in mind. So some of the top line metrics you're always going to look at them. And I don't care what executive you talk to, 99.9% of them are always going to want to see some of the top line metrics. They are. It's just, how much engagement did we get? How much was our content shared? How much was our content commented on? They're always going to care about that because we're human beings, and that's one of the ways that we evaluate success and failure is what is obviously seen in front of us. So, if you're part of the in crowd and you're sitting at the lunch table with, the popular people, you are perceived as being popular, right? If you're not sitting at that table with them, you are perceived as not being popular. It's just a fact. So when social media metrics get involved in all of this, or vanity metrics as they're called today, they are to a large degree just vanity. But at the same time, I don't think they should ever be completely discounted because there is value to that. And it's in the brand awareness category, right? So if people are liking and sharing and commenting, engaging your content, or your content via influencers, that's positive for you, right? So again, when you're thinking about the metrics are directly tied to the objective. So if you're driving leads, well, now I'm going to want to see, okay, who's engaging with the content via the influencer? Are they going to this landing page? Are they giving their email address? Are they watching the video? Let's say it's a webinar. Are they watching the webinar? How much are they watching the webinar before they drop off, right? What percentage of them see it all the way through? How many of them are turning into sales leads, right? Qualified sales leads. So you've got to look at the entire funnel that you set up for that particular campaign,
absolutely.
and you've got to measure every aspect of it. I think today, unfortunately, because of platforms like Instagram and a lot of the brouhaha or the hoopla that gets talked about in the media there, is all centered around, well, just get some Instagram influencers, promote your stuff, have a link, and then drive to a sales page, and then boom, they're all going to buy. Well, yeah, ideally that would be the way it works, but there are drop-offs throughout the sales funnel every step of the way. So you're going to want to see where the gaps are. Where is it failing, right? Maybe some of your copy has to be changed, right? Or maybe how you talk about your product or service has to be altered a bit. Maybe you got to work with the influencers a little more closely to brief them better about.
But that's another good thing that's great, is in a sense that you can change some of that partway through a campaign, which you perhaps couldn't in many other forms of media. You can repivot, you can change copy, as I say, partway through, can't you? That can actually cement the gaps that you've just alluded to.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's the call to action. Does the call to action need to be improved? Yeah. Right? What are you giving away, right? What kind of content, what kind of value are you providing up front through the influencers? What is it? Maybe that isn't enough, right? Maybe it's not enough. So it again, it depends on the objective of your campaign, and you're going to look at metrics that matter to that campaign. The other thing I'll say about metrics is, a lot of top-line metrics get talked about in the media and on blogs and whatever else, and gurus telling you, well, you should be looking at these KPIs and whatnot. Well, all I could say is take those KPIs and then bring them back inside your organization and say, which of these matter to us? How do we measure things in our other marketing campaigns? How are we measuring things there? And see if you can make those measurements work for your influencer campaign too. So make sure that the measurement and the metrics matter to your business. And that's going to alter a little bit from business to business and campaign to campaign. So that's really, really critical. That's why I say if you should spend 80% of your time up front on a campaign as opposed to in the campaign itself, if you spend 80% of your time up front putting together a quality campaign.
You mean in the research process and the
research process.
Yeah.
What are we trying to achieve here? Make sure the goals are real clear. What influencers do we want to try to recruit into our campaign, right? And why? Choose them carefully, right? Be selective. So if you put a lot of upfront work into it, the campaign itself tends to go a lot more smoothly, in my experience.
Influence, the global podcast that shines a spotlight on the influencer marketing industry.
So that's it for another edition of Influence. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe and listen to our other episodes. And as always, we welcome your feedback. So from me, Gordon Glenister, goodbye.